Richard will pick those up as we go along. So that's perfect. And the other two things to let you know is once I put up the presentation, unfortunately, I'm not necessarily going to see you. So that's why don't be surprised if I ask a question and you might kind of put a hand up and I don't respond. But that's what Richard is here for, which would be great. And the other thing, just to let you know, is I do have a rather poorly dog that unfortunately has had to stay with me today. So just in case you hear any barking, it will be me on there. But lovely. So I think I'm going to get the slides up, so please bear with me. Lovely. Can I just Richard, could I just ask you to check, can everyone see the slides?
I can see the slides, Roya.
Lovely. Okay, fantastic.
I don't think anyone said they can't, so that's
fantastic.
Great.
Lovely. So I'm gonna get started. So thank you very much all for joining today. Our funding and finance, providing some tips and insights into what's available out there. My name is Roya Crude, so I'm one of the senior growth champion managers at Enterprise EM3 Growth Hub. I've had over the years worked a range of businesses and SMEs across kind of Surrey and Hampshire and the southeast, supporting them around accessing grants, but also equity and debt as well. And what I've tried to do here is try and kind of, if you like, pull together some of those best practices and learnings and sharing also some updated information on what's actually happening in particularly the focus today is going to be the grant world, because as you can imagine, an hour could probably spend at least an hour on each of those areas. But I'm going to, particularly the focus of the slides is going to be on grants today and getting funding ready. Just to kind of get started though, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Enterprise EM3 Growth Hub. We're talking about funded support, and I'm sure hopefully you're all aware that whether you fall into the Enterprise EM3 area or other areas, there are funded growth hubs. And what we're there to do is to provide that tailored support to businesses who are looking to scale up. And supporting you, directing you, mentoring you where relevant, to help you get to that next stage. We do that through a range of growth champions, and we also do that through bespoke diagnostics and business plans, and work through those with you. So just to give you an idea, some of the areas that we work with, I've worked with recently on businesses, is everything from business planning, developing a vision and strategy, to sales and marketing, financial management, funding, and supporting them through procurement process as well. And hopefully you've seen a list of workshops that we've got coming up as well. So all of those really feed into the areas that we support businesses with individually as well. So let's move forward on there. So today what we're going to focus on is your funding journey, so touching on some of the key things to be thinking about as you go through that process, then looking at grants, touching on debt finance, as part of that the startup loan as well, touching on equity, and then some key action points to follow up. So starting on the funding journey, building a sustainable business, some of the key things to look at, which I'm sure everyone here is thinking about, already started that process, is what stage is that business? What's the ambition for your business? And as part of that, what's the ambition? What's the vision? Where are you at? Where you're looking at either, if you have done so far, self-funding, or what stage are you looking to kind of step out and look at that external funding? And I guess the other key message that I want to put here is that all of these different areas of external finance, whether it's grants, debt or equity, can actually work together as well. And I think that that's the crucial thing to kind of bring into the landscape. So what's the value proposition? How does that feed into that? Do you have a set strategy and plan in place to achieve the goals? How much money are you going to need? Do you have full understanding of your financials? Later on, we'll be talking around making sure that you, the assumptions that you're making within your business plan or financials or applications for grant, debt or equity are actually backed up. What's the company structure and how will all of this going together improve profit, productivity, innovation, feeding into developing that sustainable business and reaching the next level for scaling up? So as part of when you're looking to access external finance, one of the key things is to consider what lenders are looking at. And actually, if you think about grant, debt and equity, the audience and the organisations and the funders for that all have very different dynamics and impact and KPIs that they are also having to report to. So and we'll go through those in more detail at the moment, shortly. So, you know, it's really important to think about who the audience is that you're going to ask for that funding. If it's a grant, is it a local grant? So what kind of local impact are they looking for? If it's debt finance and you're going to an alternative funder, so say, for example, Funding Circle, you know, what are the key things that they're going to be looking at? What are they going to be wanting to see in the documentation in your financials? Because the two, of course, there'll be some a large amount of overlap, but there'll also be some very individual specifics. So really start thinking about understanding what the audience wants to see within what your application or presentation for that finance is going to look like. So just to start off with grants, some of you may be aware that a few months ago there were quite a few grants available, particularly around developing your environmental sustainability. So there was a large programme in the South East called Locase, but there were also quite a lot of growth grants available, particularly one that I was working with across the Solent area. The majority of those that were funded, they were the last of the European funding, the ERDF, European Regional Funding. Those stopped in June, and there has been a couple of months of a gap and a change really in where the government funding is going into to support grants. However, there has been some new grants that started to come out, and I think from a timing wise, it's quite exciting because we've already, I mean, literally since yesterday. So I'm going to talk through some of those. We've got some new grants, new local grants that have started to come up. But what I'm going to talk about today is actually, while, you know, the landscape is changing on from a grant perspective, where is the new funding going to be coming from? Where do you need to be making sure that you're keeping on top of, you know, is it the sector organisations? Is it going to be your local council, your county council? In fact, probably all of those, where the new grants are going to be starting to appear, and also therefore keeping an eye on when they start and when they finish, because actually some of them have got quite a quick turnaround. So grants generally that you're going to come across are going to be either local growth grants or what's termed rural grants. And actually one of the recent ones that came out yesterday is a rural grant. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on those in a moment. Some of them will be national. So you've got your local grants, you will have your national growth grants, and some will also be sector specific. There may be, and we can talk about this after the presentation, but there may be some of the businesses here that come from the creative sector. And there is at the moment quite a few creative sector grants coming out from different national organisations supporting that sector. Some of you may be familiar with Innovate UK grants and competition calls. There has been a few 100%, but generally they've been match funded and they are on a rolling basis. If you are familiar with those, then hopefully you've also heard of KTPs that also come out from Innovate UK and gives you the opportunity to work on projects, innovation projects with academia and students, and those top four I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on in the upcoming slides. So just to focus here on the last three, again, hopefully you've been aware that there has been different forms of skill funding actually over the last couple of years. So you might have been involved with the Kickstart programme that finished, I believe, about a year ago now, but also hopefully you're aware that there is funding and obviously very much support and encouragement from government around taking on apprenticeships. There have also been some big skill programmes that have launched and are launching in the Southeast around connecting businesses much more closely with further education colleges and universities and schools around developing that next level of talent and skills, because again, one of the biggest challenges or blockers actually for scaling up for businesses at the moment is very much around actually finding talent. So retaining talent and finding talent has become a big challenge, particularly in the Southeast. The other funded programme to make sure that you're aware of is the Help to Grow programme. So some of you may have already attended that, but that is a leadership and development programme. I call it a bit of a mini MBA. And that is for businesses that have 5 or more employees. It's run by business schools over a 12-week period and is 90% funded by government. So there is a small amount for businesses to pay, but the majority is covered by a grant from government, which is paid up front. And it's a combination of workshops, leadership and management workshops, peer-to-peer, and also one-to-one mentoring. The other thing to also make you aware is that depending on what area you are, there some councils are also providing working with organisations to work with local businesses to develop sustainability audits and also recommendations. And again, that's something from a Growth Hub perspective, certainly in Enterprise EM3, that we can support you with as well. Oh, sorry, bear with me. Yeah, so what I want to do though here is just quickly touch on two grants actually here, but a third one shortly that have literally just come out. So some local ones, just to kind of give you a bit of a feel for the grant. Sorry, Richard, can I just check? Have I missed? Let me, apologies, I'm just trying to, I don't want to, I have a feeling I might have, yes, sorry, here we go. I just want to go back on this because it's actually a really important slide. So I want to focus a little bit more on local grants, because these are the ones that have started to come out and we've seen more of. So couple of kind of tips and thoughts for you to think about when you're applying for these or putting through an expression of interest, is that local grants generally, as you would expect, will now going forward be coming from either your local council or your county council. They might actually be delivered by another organisation, but the money will be coming from government to local council or county council. So therefore, going back to thinking about your audience from a local grant perspective, the majority are going to be driven by economic and or community impact, depending what the objective of the grant is. So if we focus on the economic local grants, the growth grants, then the key KPIs that they'll generally be looking at, because it's what they need to be feeding back into government, is going to be looking at long-term sustainable plans. So creating GVA, gross value added, that's going to be based on new jobs for the region, retaining the staff that you already have, as you would expect, increased turnover, profit, innovation, so new products or services, and also expansion. So expansion to local markets, but also actually premises as well. So it's not that they're not necessarily looking for internationalization, but if you were going for a Department of Trade grant, then that would probably come top of the list. However, if you're going for a local grant, then it's going to be much more around looking at the local impact. And the reason I'm really kind of stressing this, because these are the things that you need to make sure when you're applying, or if you're putting together a business plan or a business case, is really highlighted. There will be always lists of exclusions and regulations, and throughout this presentation I talk about guidelines and really focusing on the detail, and being able to understand what can and can't be funded, because a couple of grants I'll talk to you about in a moment, a lot of them are capital grants. So it's really important to understand what they can cover and what they can't, before obviously you start committing to spend. But the other really important piece with most grants that come out is that you can't backdate it. So even if you put paid for part of it, or it was only the month before, it's very much the majority of grants are based on forward spend. So that's the other key thing to think about. And the majority at the moment also match funded. So again, from a match funding perspective, it's really important to understand what match funding you can use. So the grant programme one of the grant programmes that finished a few months ago across the Solent, you couldn't use asset finance for any capital purchases, because with asset finance, you obviously didn't own that piece of machinery or equipment there and then. However, interestingly, with one of the new grants that has just come out, which I'll talk to you, the EV grant, you can use asset finance, but you can also, of course, use your own internal funding, finance, and also debt or equity as well as part of that match funding. What the application process generally tends to be for local grants is that you will initially put through an expression of interest, which they will look at. Then that list they'll then come back to you depending on what that feedback is, and then you will be asked to do a full grant application. And as part of that, again, generally you'll be asked to the previous programme, ask for a full business plan. Interestingly, with the new ones that have come out, it's more around developing a business case. I always, however, say that if you're actually scaling up your business, then having a business plan and having all your financials and being on top of all the financials is going to be critical anyway, actually, whether you're going for external finance or not. But certainly, obviously, it will feed into your business case as well. They will generally want to have updated financials and also forecasts as well, which all feed into why you're making the application. So one of the really key things is to make sure that they all thread together. So, you know, the application, what you're asking for, why you're asking it, how it fits into that vision and plan of developing a sustainable growth business, that whole message is threaded through all the documentation that you're providing, including the financials and of course the cash flow and P&L forecasts as well. They will also ask for quotes. So again, going back to focusing on the details, depending on what you're asking for, it will either be one quote or sometimes 2 or 3. So again, just be aware of what those requirements are going to be. And I guess the key message for me here today is to try and help you kind of get that funding ready, because you want to make sure that you've got as much of these, or on top of as much of these as possible, either when the grant's open and you think it's going to be, you know, relevant and timely for you, but also if you're keeping an eye out for any future local or national grants. So going back to, I've got I think a very sensitive mouse. So going back to local and sector grants. So I think I mentioned to you that one literally has just come out yesterday. And I flew in last night. So I've managed to get some top line information quickly for you for this morning, because I thought it was really important to share. So the Surrey's Rural Prosperity Fund has just gone live. I'm very happy to share these slides. I'll send you the link afterwards. But I would definitely say that it's worth having a look at. Obviously, I can't say that you're going to be eligible, but it's definitely worth checking if you think it could be of relevance. So this is actually funded by DEFRA, which is the Environmental, Food and Rural government department, and it is focused on the rural areas in Waverley, which has Farnham in the centre, Guildford and Tandridge over towards Caterham Way. What I would suggest is you go on that link and actually check. So if you are interested, that you fall into what's qualified as a rural area in those areas, because just because you are in Guildford or Waverley doesn't mean that you will fall into what's termed rural. This grant, for example, is capital projects. It's maximum 50% grant. And up to £50,000. It's also open to businesses, charities, and also community organisations. And when you click through, you'll see, going back to thinking about the audience and what their objectives are, it's around supporting that rural and visitor economy. So that's one that's literally just come out. I would definitely suggest you have a look at. But that will also give you a feel, because the detail, going back to detail here, it's going to be really important. This starts off with expression of interest and then a fuller application with those documentations we talked about just now. Again, another local grant that's been launched actually tomorrow in Royal Holloway for Runnymede is going to be a Runnymede Growth Grant. So again, if anybody here falls within that district, then please do keep an eye out for that, or send me a message, because I'm actually going to be there at the launch. So, you know, very happy to share with you what that entails and how you can apply for that. I guess one of the key things, just to let you know, is that I think I mentioned that some of the local grants may be delivered by another organisation. They might be funded government via your local council, but they may also be part of a business support programme. So I guess my kind of suggestion would be, going back to, therefore, what does the funder want to get out from this as well? And if they're doing a business support programme, then it's a whole package. So, you know, make sure you maximise that, because if you're up against other businesses, if it's a limited grant, which most of them will be, and you are just applying and not getting engaged with anything else, you know, that's going on as part of that business support package, but other businesses are, and they're applying for it, and they've got a good business case, then, you know, it's not necessarily going to put you in the best light as it should do, as if you were all part of that. So that's the Runnymede Growth Grant. I also just very quickly, again, as I mentioned, if there are businesses here that fall into the creative sector and creative industries, there are also some really interesting sector grants that have come out from different organisations, grants and also loans, but loans at preferential interest rates as well. And again, very happy to go into those in more detail and share those with you. But I thought it just important to highlight. So the third local grant that's just come out, again, just to make sure that you're aware of this, is the A3 EV grant, which came out about a week ago. And the funding is there for 1,000 vans to be funded, from £5,000 to 10k grants for new EV van. It can be used with the ULEZ Scrappers scheme. But the key thing to bear in mind, it's around an area on the A3 that's been highlighted as particularly bad from a pollution perspective. So if you are driving on the A3, passing the University Hill area, 150 journeys over a year, then again, please do look at this. Or again, if you know of other businesses or people who do, then please do direct them to it, because it's a really good grant. It is match funded, but the great thing about this one is that it can also be used with asset finance, which, you know, makes it obviously easier to match fund. Again, I've put the link so that you can find out more about it. But really, the three, I would say, local grants that have just come out live is this one, the Runnymede Growth Grant, which is launching tomorrow, and the Surrey Rural Fund that's just launched. Other grants, and I put added loans here actually in KTPs for you to be aware of. As I mentioned earlier, come out from an organisation, a government organisation called Innovate UK. And these tend to be quite specific. They tend to be very much focused around that kind of early stage R&D and commercialisation. So it's not necessarily going to be relevant for all businesses, but there will be businesses that absolutely need to be aware of it. The application process in this is also, I'd say the application form is much more detailed. So I think the key thing to say is, if you are looking at applying for Innovate UK grant or loan, then make sure you give yourself plenty of time. But also, again, going back to if you fall into our growth hub area, or you know, if your local growth hub, make sure you connect with them, because again, we've got people that are specialists in this area that can actually guide you and support you with the Innovate UK applications. The other organisation that's actually the business-facing support for Innovate UK is called KTN. And I put the link there for you as well. So again, they've got regional advisors that if you do the application, you can share it with them, they can review it, they can give you some feedback. So really important, because these are quite much longer application forms and highly competitive. The Innovate UK grants cover lots of industry themes. So again, make sure you signed up to their newsletter if you feel that that's something of relevance to you. The Innovate loans tend to be for businesses that, if you like, have gone past the R&D and early commercialization stage, and they have started trading, but they don't necessarily want to be going to business angels or other forms of equity. So they're looking at debt finance to take them to that next stage. There are also regular what's called smart grants. So these are the grants that are open to any, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. It's not it's not themed, but they are looking for something that is disruptive, what they term disruptive innovation. And again, they're on a rolling 3-month period. They're there for R&D and early commercialization. And with these, generally they're match funded. Very occasionally you will get something that's 100%, but majority of the time it's match funded. And with these, actually, you will if you're accepted, you will generally get some money upfront or at different stages of the work that's been agreed on the application. So you don't have to wait till the end to get the funding back. So I think that's an important piece to bear in mind. And there's generally 2 forms. So projects 6 to 18 months can be single or collaborative, up to $500,000, or larger projects that can take up to 36 months, and can be up to 2 million, and again very collaborative. The key thing here, if you are going for Innovate UK, is that generally they like to see you being collaborative. So particularly if it's with a university or other kind of R&D type organisation. So just something to keep in mind there. Knowledge transfer partnerships. So again, if Innovate UK grants are of interest to you, then knowledge transfer partnerships are definitely also worth considering. And interestingly, as a business, you may also feel that the Innovate UK grant, actually you're not R&D, you're not early commercialization, but actually the KTP may be interesting because you may have an individual project, a program that you're exploring, that you're researching, and actually linking up with somebody in the university and a student could really support or drive that project forward. And that's where the knowledge transfer partnerships would come in. And again, that there is funding there for that, and it's a great opportunity again to if you like, get some of that new thinking into whatever that kind of innovative project or program might be. And again, going back, you know, really important to remember that there is support out there for you. You know, otherwise you'll go on the website, you know, there's so many grants and calls out there, but that business facing support with the link down there can come from your KTN in conjunction with your local growth hub as well. Right, so I'm just keeping an eye on time, so make sure we've got some time for questions at the end as well. So moving on from grants, then debt finance. And as you can see, with the majority of grants, there is match funding, and that match funding, as I mentioned, can be with debt and with equity, or a mixture of those, depending on what your ambition is for the business. Generally, just keep an eye on whether assets, a lot of the grants coming out of capital, so just keep an eye on whether asset finance can be included. Certainly up to now, I haven't seen that much, but interestingly, as I mentioned, with the EV van fund, you can, so that might be changing. But moving on to debt finance, as probably you're all aware, since lockdown, there has been a whole range of government supported debt finance that's come out. I'm sure many of you are familiar with bounce back loans. C-bills, more recently the recovery loan scheme. And what that has done, it's seen a lot more businesses, actually many for the first time, start utilising debt finance. And that in turn has brought out much more alternative funders out there. So rather than, if you like, the kind of key top 4 banks, such as, you know, you've got a whole range of alternative funders out there now, offering an absolute whole range of products and services. And many you would have heard of people, for example, like Funding Circle. So, as I mentioned, the key thing to bear in mind is there are literally thousands of products out there and lots of new products coming out all the time. I always, however, say, and this is just me speaking, that I would go to my bank first. But obviously, depending what your requirements are, the top 4 banks are not necessarily providing all the new products that might be coming out and might be funded by the alternative funders, but always shop around, always, but particularly now, for best interest rate and fees and different ways. So if you're looking to get some quick working capital, thinking of different ways that might actually, you might be able to do that apart from perhaps kind of traditional way. There's, whether it's invoice finance or trade finance or merchant finance, depending what sector, what stage of the business that you're in. Just bear in mind, no surprise, that may have to provide security and personal guarantees for larger sums, particularly if you're lacking business assets or track record or credit history. Interestingly, I was at a fintech launched a few weeks ago for brokers, a platform whereby the whole process of automating applications, but very quickly understanding credit histories and whether to progress or not, has just been speeded up. So that whole side, just be aware that is so important, and that can sometimes be it. That can be that first stumbling block. So it's important to really be aware of what your credit rating is and how you can improve that and what might affect it. Also, we talked about asset finance. So obviously you've got asset finance, but also refinance. Still have the kind of end of recovery loan scheme. And also, of course, there are still some government debt finance available there as well. Generally, the kind of documentation that alternative funders and debt finance are going to be looking for at the moment is 6-month back statements, management information, hopefully nothing here that's a surprise, 2-year financial accounts, last 4 quarters VAT payments, list of loans and repayment times, and also if you're actually going for refinancing or asset finance, all your quotes as well. So that's going to be important on there. And again, thinking about the audience, if you're going to a bank or an alternative funder, what they're going to be wanting to see is they want to see the plan A and B for repayments, and looking at the risk. So really important to be able to back up those assumptions. So slightly different from what some of the key, if you like, dynamics of what the grant providers might be looking for. But here, what they want to be looking for is making sure that they're going to get paid, and you've got a plan B for that as well. Just thought it was useful just to touch on a couple of government funded loans, particularly as interest rates are going up, as we know. So in case there's any businesses here that have been trading for less than 3 years and are looking for external funding, then the startup loan is still available. Hopefully you're all aware of that. And that has now been extended. Actually, it was 2 years, but it's now been extended for businesses for less than 3 years. It changed about 6 months ago. You can borrow up to £25,000, but the interesting thing here is that it's for each director. So if you've got 2 directors in the business, you can each apply for the up to 25k. Fixed interest rate per annum. At the moment, we paid over 1 to 5 years, government backed. But also there is this free advisory support there as well. Application form to fill in, and they will need a lot of the documentation that we've already talked about. So if you fall in that bracket and you're looking for external finance, definitely worth looking. My suggestion would be, in the link at the end will be there, is to go into the British Business Bank, that will have a list of the providers that are supporting businesses with a startup loan. The other organisation I would look at is FSE, Finance South East, particularly for our region here. So these again are funded by LEPs, LEPs via government. And depending what area you're in, so thinking about Enterprise M3, they provide businesses with debt finance, but also equity. And interestingly, they are looking at, I'm not sure this has happened yet, but they're looking at joining the two up. So actually, if a business is looking for a combination of those, looking to see if they could have a package. With interest rates going up, with external funders, I would definitely say, if you are looking at that, and again, conversation to be had with them, or you can start with ourselves at the Growth Hub, is to see what options might be available for you within Finance South East. Sorry, let me, have I? No, that's fine. So just to kind of retouch, how do financial sources interpret the information? So key things, we talked about accurate and reasonable assumptions based on previous accounts. So, you know, putting yourself in their shoes, really, are the financial projections credible? So you're going to be forecasting, you're going to be making assumptions, whether you're going for grants or debt. What are they actually based on? Do they take into account the requested finance? So going back to grants, if you're doing those financial forecasting, then make sure that you go from a presumption that you've got the grant. Or if you're doing forecasting and you're going for debt finance, which sometimes will be required, particularly if you haven't been trading, if you've been trading for less than 2 or 3 years, then again, make sure that those assumptions are in there. Do they detail the specific investment, repayment of loans? So have you got those actually in those forecasts? All your VAT, if you're registered, all your VAT details. And if there are pinch points within the cash flow, being able to having those explanations of how, why and how you will be able to move forward with those. So it's been really, I would say, standing back and thinking, depending who the audience is, what the key things that they're going to want to see in there, and be able to understand that the assumptions are actually credible. As I mentioned, I am keeping an eye on time, so I'm going to whiz through this piece, but again, very happy to go into more detail afterwards separately on all of these areas, but with equity as well. So we've got grants, we've got debt, and we've got equity. And equity generally is where larger investment, larger sums of money, a business may be looking for an external investor. They'll be selling part of their shares for that funding, which might mean they give up an element of control. Some investors will be seeking higher risk, some will be seeking and therefore more unproven ventures, some will be looking at lower risk, some will be looking at returns within 5 years, 10 years, some will want some more kind of hands-on involvement or engagement. And again, if you're looking at any of these areas, I've put a couple of links here for you to look at to give you an idea. So again, business angels, generally high net worth individuals, generally looking at probably, you know, I'd say $250,000, $500,000 max. They tend to be interested in that sector. They've kind of run and sold successful businesses before. They can claim tax relief. And generally, depending on where you are, there will be business angel groups. So, for example, if you're in Surrey, there's what was Surrey 100, there's S100. And there can also be attached to that support around developing your pitch deck and presentation and business plan and financials to actually go in front of a panel and present. So again, just touching on venture capital, where you might be looking at much larger amounts. And again, most definitely, there will be accelerators and incubators that can support with that as well. And again, links to a couple of websites where it will kind of help you direct on that. Again, very happy to go into much more detail on these, if these are areas of interest to you. We've also got a lot of local, as I mentioned, Surrey 100, but we also have accelerators that can help businesses really pull together documentation needed for raising investment. So just aware that I'm going to just finish off on this slide actually. So I guess the key action points, I would say, if you're looking at making sure that you're on top of any kind of external funding, whether it's grants, any new kind of debt products or any government-backed debt products, or any information, if you're looking at external investment and equity, is to make sure that you're connected to as many organisations that can can give you that information or support you during that process. So as part of that, you know, the growth hubs, we're here till the end of March and certainly onwards in some form, working with local and county councils. But, you know, make sure that you're connected with us. We can do business support, we can do as much or as little hand-holding as required, but also most importantly, we can help keep you updated with what's available and connect you with whether it's sector organisations or other organisations or collaborations that might be of interest. I mentioned the British Business Bank, the Finance Hub, absolutely great finance hub for helping you with all of those three areas actually that we've talked about. So do sign up. If there's one action, I'd say, if you haven't already, sign up for Growth Hub, but sign up for the local council and county council business newsletters for grants, because that's where they're going to be coming from. Make sure that you thread the theme of your application through the whole documentation. Focus on the detail, because the guidelines are really important. And though there's some great grants, at the same time, I don't want you, and I have seen this, wasting time on applications only to be told that actually, you know, you're not eligible. But focus on the detail, really try and look at the objectives of whoever that funding audience might be, backup assumptions, prepare the documentation. As I mentioned right at the start, actually a lot of the documentation we're looking at, whether it's business plan, cash flow, forecasting, P&L, balance sheets, etc. These are all things that we should, as a business, be having in place anyway, and obviously absolutely critical if you're going for any kind of external finance, so that you become growth and funding ready. And I think the key thing is that there is these organisations and support out there to help you with that. And on that note, I am going to stop presenting. I'm aware we've got 8 minutes. 8 minutes left. So very much a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully it's given you a little bit of a feel of what's out there, what might or could be out there very soon, and just some of the things to think about when you're looking at any kind of external funding, and how those 3 funding options could actually work together on there. But I'm going to stop talking now, and please do come off silent, and any questions or any thoughts or any comments.
Well, Roya, I've got a couple of questions that have come up through chat. Do you mind if I ask those first?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
So I'll read this one. This is a good one. This is from Stuart. If a company has not built up any significant credit history, would the director's personal credit ratings get taken into account when applying for funding or loans?
Well, I'd like to say no, but I think in reality, they possibly would. It would depend. Sorry, that's the dog. It would depend. I think you mentioned loans, so I would probably say most likely. But again, happy, Stuart, to have a kind of separate conversation in a little bit more detail on that. The startup loan, I should say, is actually a personal loan on that one.
Okay, I've got a couple more, Roy, if I may.
Yeah.
Another really good one here. So this question is from McGinnis Jewelry. I'm in the jewelry repairs business and actually have 1 to 2 clients a week, which is very poor. I'm operating from home and do not have a shop or street presence. I have been self-funding and now I'm running out of money. I need a street presence, meaning a shop. I have a website where customers order a service, but the website is now outdated and needs to be upgraded. What is the best way to get funded? What can you advise, Roya?
So it would depend on, sorry, did you say what area that you're in? So apologies,
jewelry business, jewelry repairs.
Jewelry repairs, sorry.
Yeah.
And it would depend on how much you were looking for, what you were looking to use that for. It sounds like it could be around premises, actually. I think you mentioned going on the high street. It would depend on your finances at the moment, and how that fits into what you need to be able to make that step up, depending what area that you're in, whether there's any grants that can possibly support you with that. So certainly, again, going back to, I think with any kind of funding and finance, it's quite bespoke. So again, very happy to have a more in-depth conversation, because it's so dependent. There's so many factors that will go into this. But as part of what we do at the Growth Hub, you know, again, very happy to, obviously from a confidential perspective, go through financials and have a look at what options there might be for you with that.
And just a comment from Jemesh Roya. Jemesh, thank you for your comment. Jemesh says it's highly recommended before raising any equity to apply for SEIS/EIS advance assurance. this will give angels and VCs reassurance that you
Yes.
are eligible. I hope that made sense.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Very, very good point.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamesh.
Any other questions? And if you, as I said, very happy to have that kind of more one-to-one conversation around both of those points, around both the kind of personal checks, but also around expanding premises or going on the high street. So please do. I think you've got my email. Richard, will my email address be shared?
Yes, I will share that. We're going to send out the slides, and when the recording's ready, we'll also share that too. We probably need to top and tail that a little bit, but all the slides would be shared, of course, and really useful information there. So thank you.
Brilliant. No, thank you. And I guess on the, if there aren't any more questions, the final note for me would be, as I mentioned at the start, is that apart from the kind of one-to-one business support, which is fully funded, we have got a whole range of workshops. Many of them are face-to-face, and there will be some more virtual like this, but they're all around very much the key challenges or blockers for businesses moving to that next stage or scaling up. So whether that's around leadership and management, whether that, skills, management skills development, sales and marketing, net zero. We've got a couple of really good workshops coming up around, if you like, simple steps around, improving your ESG rating in your kind of whole sustainability piece. And these all, as I said, fully funded. We've got an excellent one coming up around AI, which we're doing with the University of Surrey, beginning of December, which again is for all sectors. It's around that kind of myth busting, because I know sometimes AI can mean so many different things. So it's that risk and reward of AI. So, please do. You'll get the presentation, you'll get the links, hopefully for the other workshops there as well. And then you've got the one-to-one support with us as well at the Growth Hub. Great. Lovely. Well, I was going to say 12 o'clock on the dot and only one bark. So I'm happy with that. Lovely to meet you all. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you all, talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.